I have always loved survival horror games. I have always found the atmosphere of horror games really cool and, in a weird way, kind of beautiful. It's the only genre where I get this feeling of dread and unease that's really hard to replicate in other genres. The thing is, I get scared really easily. When I was a little ugly fetus, there were many times when I tried to play a horror game, and at one point I just couldn't keep playing and had to pause the game. Finishing games like Silent Hill and Resident Evil took forever because it was impossible for me to play them for too long. And for example, encountering Nemesis on Resident Evil 3 was like the most frightening experience ever. I just had to pause the game. But even though I'm like the biggest pussy alive, at the same time, I'm really drawn towards the aesthetic of horror games. And I really love survival horror games. There's something really special about them. Walking around in Silent Hill or even hearing the soundtrack for a bit makes me feel really comfortable and calm. And I love how unique survival horror games used to look. I love the way they introduce their world really slowly. I love the mysterious vibes, the attentions to detail, the amazing soundtracks. And for all of that, it makes me really sad to explore new games on Steam and pretty much find the exact same game over and over. And even though I had fun playing some of those games, they feel really different from some of the old survival horror games, in the sense that it's really hard to remember them after 2 weeks. So why do we still remember Silent Hill after so many years? And why it's so hard to differentiate between all the new games that are releasing? There was this point in time where horror games became part of the mainstream media. Remember when games like Slender Man started to come out? Slender Man was a really short game with really basic and straight to the point mechanics. You were thrown right in the middle of the action, and all you had to do was to find the notes before Slender Man caught you, which was almost impossible. That's when YouTube started to get filled with videos of people trying to get scared. People wanted to play those type of games to get scared, and it was kind of fun. And I think right here is when people realized they could gain a lot of money by making games like this. And what happened? Horror games stopped being a personal experience. Things like atmosphere, story, music, and nice mechanics were all left aside to create games that basically are ugly creature that chase you while you have to do something really specific. Find the 7 goats, find the 7 notes, find the 7 children, which makes you feel like you're playing the same game over and over again, only with a different setting. Most modern horror games started to feel like the same game, and that's partly because most of them are made in Unity and are using the same assets all the time, and well, because they trying to use the same formula that they know already works, the YouTube-friendly type of game. Those type of games don't feel like games created by people really passionate about horror. It doesn't feel like they're supposed to tell something or be something special. It's as if they're building the story around the jump scares rather than building the jump scares around the story. In Silent Hill, everything is a story. The whole world is a story. Every game is set in the same town, and that makes you feel like the town actually exists and doesn't feel like it's just a random setting. It gives you some sort of familiarity. I'm pretty sure you are also tired of seeing this office over and over again, this hotel over and over again. They don't feel like real places. Silent Hill does. I want to use one of my favorite horror movies as an example of something that has the things I think are lacking in some other horror games: identity, atmosphere, patience, a good soundtrack. And that movie is The Ring. I watch that movie every few years and it's still just as good. It has a pretty straightforward concept, cursed object that once you watch it, it seals your fate. And it's so effective. The Ring has this very recognizable style, kind of like Twilight. Like, you can look at any frame of the movie and you know what movie it is. And just like Silent Hill, The Ring does such a good job of creating an eerie atmosphere and a level of creepiness that not so many films have managed to do. The whole movie has this blue-gray color palette that feels really cold and wet. It's really unique. And what I like about the movie is that it takes its time to explain what's going on. It's not trying to make you jump at every single moment. It keeps this atmosphere of mystery that's really creepy, and it relies on psychological horror and imagery to create scares. Not a quick frame of a weird looking creature screaming at you, just good storytelling. And even in scenes like when Samara comes out of the TV, it's not just a jump scare. It prolongs your suffering quite a bit. I mean, at this point, you already know you are fucked. And after all of this, you're dead. It's pretty similar to what you feel when you're going through the creepy hallway at the beginning of Silent Hill 1. You already suspect you're going to die, but the pace is deliberately slow, making you go farther and farther from safety, all while hearing this beautiful eerie shearing sound of rusted wheelchairs. Everything gets darker and darker until you discover the dead body in the wall, and the creatures trap you. You can't do anything to prevent that. But those are key moments in the story. They don't happen all the time. Actually, most of the time you are walking kind of chill with nothing stressful happening. The suffering comes in waves. We need moment of rest, or else it becomes too overwhelming. Modern games sometimes make you feel too much. There's no pause, there's no build-up. It's a frenetic energy pretty much all the time. They try to put you in such extremely stressful situations that they stop seeming like situations you could go through. They stopped being something that you feel is real, and that itself creates a huge disconnect between the player and the game. So basically, the only moment in which we get scared is when suddenly the video of the monster that was chasing us appears out of nowhere. And after laughing for being scared, you continue through the game as if nothing happened. One of the most important things that I think makes The Ring, Silent Hill, and so many classic horror games so unique is the soundtrack. Let's face it, people are getting really lazy with the soundtracks. It's not enough to keep two keys pressed, you know? What I love about old survival horror games is that they seem to be made with love, and their soundtracks too.
その子のサウンドを聞いて、その人のメンタル的なところが何かが揺れたりとかっていう、何かがこう動くっていうことは僕はそれは求めてちょっとそういう風な作風にはちょっとしています。
Just hearing a little bit of the Silent Hill soundtrack immediately gets me in the vibe of the game, and it's a really smart way to put their games deep into your unconscious. Sounds and music are one of the easiest way to make you remember something. I mean, I still remember the sound effects when you were scrolling through the options of the menu in Resident Evil. So that must mean something. And a good soundtrack is so important to set the correct atmosphere. That's why I love the Ring soundtrack. It's so damn good and distinctive and sexy. The little weird sounds are creepy as hell, and the music that accompanies the whole movie is just so good. It shows that it was made with love and emotion. Without music, you put all the job into the gameplay and everything else. And let's face it, sometimes new games don't even have a decent gameplay. The reason the Ring curse was so scary is that it made you completely vulnerable, and that vulnerability is so scary because what would you do in Rachel's situation? It's easy to understand Rachel as a protagonist, but who are all the protagonists of these new Steam games? I think in an attempt to allow you to identify more with the protagonist by giving you a character totally devoid of personality, they removed all the possibility of feeling identified with the protagonist. It's really hard to feel anything for the protagonist of Outlast. Just because the camera is in first person and I can see my hands doesn't make me feel more fear. I don't need to see exactly what Harry is watching to feel empathy for him. I can relate to Harry. I can understand his pain because I feel it through him, but I'm not him. That's why I like the camera in Silent Hill. The distance from the character makes me, in a weird way, closer to what's happening. This one is kind of hard to balance because if in a game you have nothing to fight back and you cannot do anything but run, at some point you feel useless and it gets tiring to just run around hiding from the creatures. The same happens with the kind of games where when the creature traps you, you get a jump scare and then respawn. It's hard to keep getting scared if you die 10 times in 20 minutes. It just gets annoying. But on the other side, too much ammo ruins the sense of vulnerability. And less lessens the respect you feel from the monsters. Silent Hill, Resident Evil, and many of the classic survival horror games balance this pretty well. In Silent Hill, sometimes a steel pipe is all you have. You still have a gun and it's not that difficult to find ammo, but the aiming part is kind of hard, so it compensates and you still feel vulnerable. In Resident Evil 4, you have a lot of ammo, but it is a bit hard to aim and there's a lot of enemies that require a lot of bullets to get kills, so it's still okay. But with the first-person perspective that most smaller horror games have, you don't feel vulnerable. You shouldn't have the perfect precision you have in CSGO in a survival horror game. It feels too unreal, and almost no one has a gun in their house, and no one knows how to shoot perfectly and recharge really fast. So having perfect control over your aim in a horror game feels kind of weird.
But Nova, I have an AK-45 on my nightstand and my father taught me how to recharge with my eyes closed before he died.
I feel that recent survival horror games need more of something called
love
in order to be better games. It's really hard to create a good game if you don't love the genre. You can't just skip all these steps that create a terrified atmosphere and move on to the scares right away.
It doesn't work that way, Cindy.
But you know, everything comes in cycles, even low-rise genes, unfortunately. So I think it's time for real horror to come back. Do you miss the old horror games, or do you actually prefer the modern formula for horror games? That opinion is valid too. Just let me show you something. Thanks for the comments on the previous video. You guys are always so nice to me. I don't even know how you find my videos, so thank you. Remember that if you enjoy the video, you can leave a like, and if you're interested in my content, you are welcome to join my little community. We have carrots. I hope you have a great week and see you soon. Bye bye.